like people, horses have off days, and by looking at them before they actually get on the racetrack, you get an initial impression of which way they're leaning.
This is going to sound crazy, but for me, it's intellectual stimulation.
Class is now in session. It's time for night school. Here are your hosts.
Welcome in, everyone, to Night School, the national online fan education and player development program from Horse Player Now. It's Season 8 and our 9th of 10 lessons in this 2018 season. Night School number 259 overall. We welcome you to a program tonight with our panel of experts. The Knights at the round table tonight will be our racing experts, broadcasting legend Bob Neumeier, the Dean of Night School, Jerry Shottenkirk, and Horse Player Now General Manager Brian W. Spencer. I'm Jeremy Plonk. We'll be with you for the next, hour or so. We'll bring in Steve Bick a little bit later in the show. One person noticeably absent here after the Breeders' Cup, Caton Bradar, under the weather still, fighting some laryngitis and issues from the cold weather at Churchill Downs. Hopefully the Breeders' Cup warmed up your wallets a little more than it did mine, but certainly wish Caton a speedy recovery and hope to have her back for our final Night School of the season come December. But we say hello to the panel tonight and our racing experts. First up, Mr. Bob Neumeier. How are you, Neumie?
Experts. Come on, who's an expert? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to find out. I want to locate an expert. I want to call them and chat with them or have them give me a few tips. Hey, we try the best we can. Experts? Really?
We'll use that in lieu of the word professionals. How's that?
I like that. That's better.
Jerry, how are you tonight, pal?
All right. Next time, hopefully it's no time anytime soon. But if I ever have to fill out a job application, I'll use the expert. I mean, maybe it'll impress somebody. I know Neumie won't be impressed by it. So.
A job application? I remember filling out back in the day my college applications, and I thought that was rigorous to be sure. But job application, that's a whole other thing, Jerry. I'm sure you filled it out handsomely. If I was an employer, I'd give you a job immediately. I wouldn't even need an application. I'd just give it to you immediately.
All right.
And I'm sure he's got that little box for handicapping expert checked off with a big old X on it. Brian W. Spencer. Welcome in, Spence.
Hey, thanks. Pretty excited to be back at it here at Night School post Breeders' Cup. Post a little time off was nice, and back in the saddle here and getting set to get back to things. Got some good topics tonight with some good suggestions from our Night School listeners. Looking forward to it.
Well, let's talk Breeders' Cup. It's our first show since the Breeders' Cup. It's about 10 days in the rearview mirror now from the World Championships held at Churchill Downs on November 2nd and 3rd, and maybe some best of moments or takeaways that we had from the Breeders' Cup this year. Certainly want to tip our cap to our buddy Jerry Shottenkirk on the panel tonight. The Dean, he rocked the Express Bet Breeders' Cup wager guide with a big exacta play, game winner to Nick's Go. It was a big return. Spence also had a nice return in the wager guide. So the Night School and Horse Player Now guys helped carry the water for us in that wager guide. I didn't have any luck in my division. I don't think Neumie did as well, but certainly the boys on the show tonight did well for themselves. Jerry, your takeaway from the Breeders' Cup, what did you see as the key storyline or your favorite takeaway?
Well, I'll tell you, my favorite takeaway was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, the race that I hit with.
You don't say.
Tell about you, Jerry. Don't worry about a thing.
Well, what that does, that enables you to advance to day 2.
Yeah, right.
I'm glad it happened because other than that, it's the pickings were a little bit lean. But man, what a great 2 days of watching it. The turf race with Abel getting on her belly and winning that was when it comes to putting down your money, that's no great thing, great advancement for your wallet. But sometimes you look at them and you see how hard they're trying. You see why they're champions, and it's kind of the sport of the deal that it really brings it out. And I think Abel was probably the star of the show, and game winner, of course, and then the classics. That absolutely a nice effort on his part, too.
Yeah, Accelerate didn't have a bad year. There are 10 Grade 1 races in America at a mile or an eighth or longer. He won 5 of them this year. They haven't run the Clark yet, so he's won 5 of the 9. Not a bad year for old Accelerate, capping it in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Brian, what about you? Takeaways from this year's Breeders' Cup?
You know, much like Jerry, I had a pretty good start getting line of duty home in the juvenile turf, and I gave back most of that throughout the rest of the weekend. But all that said, I think that there were 2 real standout performances for me. Just going to second what Jerry said about Enable. Really just a stretch run for the ages between her and Magical there in the lane. And, you know, she's just a champion, and to get to see her stateside was really a lot of fun, and she certainly did not disappoint after I think what maybe was a little bit trickier trip than maybe it looked at first glance. She was wide throughout. That being said, the one that I am the most excited about really just kind of hit me in the chest. Newspaper of Record. My goodness, she's an exceptional filly, and I cannot wait to see what she does. She's won 3 races now for absolute fun. I still don't even know that she knows what it's like to take a deep breath. Cannot wait to see what she has in store next season.
Yeah, and if they keep her with just 3-year-old fillies, you wonder, you know, where does the challenge come from? Someone we haven't seen yet, obviously, and, you know, the sky could be the limit for her. Maybe a trip to Royal Ascot, maybe a shot versus the boys. Who knows what they could do with her, but she looks like an absolutely exceptional 2-year-old filly, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get our first grass filly as a 2-year-old filly to get that championship hardware. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Jaywalk in the voting. Very impressive in winning the juvenile fillies, or if it will go to Newspaper of Record. Neumeier, you're our Newspaper of Record always here on the show. Your thoughts on the Breeders' Cup and what struck you?
Yeah, well, it's I think as a better, Jeremy, the Breeders' Cup is a blessing and a curse at the same time. The blessing is that many times in most races the prices are really, really strong, astronomical, in fact. So there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for those who can hone in successfully, and in this case, it really only takes 1 or 2 to put you over the top. The curse is that as well, is that it's so competitive that it makes a difficult game, to me, almost impossible. And so over the years, I've learned to kind of scale back on big days like the Breeders' Cup or the Derby or the Preakness or the Belmont, and that kind of runs contrary to most people who unload on those days. I'd rather kind of a, sleepy kind of Thursday or Friday and bet those cards rather than the Breeders' Cup. But as the guys point out, man alive, there was some great performances. Newspaper of Records, stands by itself. And it's just a shame that, Jeremy, you mentioned Accelerate and 5 Grade 1s. That horse is not going to win Horse of the Year. I'm sorry. It's going to be the horse that won the Triple Crown. That's just the way it is. I love the Breeders' Cup. I'm glad it's here. The fact that they expanded it is a whole other argument for another day. But, when you get to see the best horses paraded out, it makes it a very competitive situation and a really interesting one, I think, for most people.
And that chasing the rainbow in the Breeders' Cup is what we're just kind of conditioned for after seeing this now in the 35th year. But this year it ran so true to form and so many $35, $40, $45 kind of exactas. The last 7 races in the Breeders' Cup were all won by the first or second wagering choice. And to have that kind of run of just kind of logical after logical after logical winner runs against what I'm looking for on Breeders' Cup Day. So while it was a good day for the betting public and for people who were really dialed in, those kind of days are going to add up to horrible days for me because I'm trying to swim upstream on a day like the Breeders' Cup and maybe outthink yourself, but like Numi says, it only takes one. The problem with this year's Breeders' Cup, there's really only 2 or 3 good opportunities to hit a big score in this Cup. If you were able to come through, in the filly and mare turf, you got the 25-1 winner winner there for Cassie. That was a big shot. If you had Nix go second or Gunnevera second, those were the two key horses for this year's Breeders' Cup, because you got, Nix go second in the juvenile, which produced really inflated prices, really good exacta try, super kind of prices behind the favorite. And the same thing in the Classic, where Gunnevera really juiced up the exotics in there and paid way more probably than he should have. But in a lot of the other cases, you look back at these Breeders' Cup averages and you're expecting to see $200 exactas in the divisions on average, and they're coming back $38, $40, $46 for a deuce. That's not what we're used to seeing at the Breeders' Cup. So if you bet the Breeders' Cup with a traditional mindset like I did, you got your clock cleaned. And I'll admit, I need a winding and a new battery after that.
Hey, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, Jim. Yeah, I believe me. I've gone over in my life many times. I think the one word that needs to be used here in preparing for the Breeders' Cup, and I hear this a lot, and I think it's true, and that is that it's overwhelming. That when you sit down and try to handicap, and usually you start with the 14 or 16 horses in a lot of divisions, and this has a preference to this, and this has a preference to that. And after a while, we on the show have learned that if you do a normal sleepy day's handicapping, that a given race may be worth 30 minutes of your time, or 45 minutes of your time, or an hour of your time. Well, multiply that times 14 events.
Yeah.
And if you go after this, a day or two in advance and wait for the post positions, as most of us do, I believe that the brain only has so much capacity. And that after a while, you kind of get glazed over here. Mm-hmm. And you're better off either giving it 2 hours here, or a half hour here, 3 hours there, rather than sit down in one fell swoop and try to get most of it done, because that's the one word that I would use for it. It's an overwhelming experience.
No question about it. As we turn the corner from the Breeders' Cup to the rest of the calendar for November and December, you still have some big race days at Aqueduct and Churchill Downs on the national scene. We're at Del Mar for their fall meet. It's somewhat new still on the landscape. And, of course, in the winter, we'll turn things towards the Claiming Crown and the championship meet at Gulfstream, and, of course, Santa Anita back the day after Christmas. So it's kind of a shift and a change in the wagering waves this time of year for a lot of folks. Many places that had turf racing are either winding down the grass racing or have already concluded it. So in many cases, it becomes a bit of a more simpler time, I think, in the racing landscape. And we're not thinking about what is this horse prepping for now at this point. Horses are in races to race during this time of year and in through the winter. So maybe things get a little more simplified. And we'll talk tonight during the course of our night school how you can approach intra-race wagers, multi-race wagers with ticket construction in mind, as requested by some of our night schoolers over the past couple days and weeks leading into this lesson plan. We want to talk about some other things coming up on the calendar as well, including the AQHA's Bank of America Racing Challenge Championships. That's coming up this Saturday night at Los Alamitos. If you're a quarter horse fan, that's the quarter horse version, if you will, of the Breeders' Cup. 5 divisional championships will be on the line at Los Alamitos. Be sure to download the free Horse Player Now AQHA wagering guide for the Challenge Championships. Myself, Jerry Shottenkirk, Horse Player Now quarter horse expert Terry Terrell, Dennis Blake of the American Quarter Horse Association, and the one and only Ed Burgard of Los Alamitos, all taking part in that wagering guide. You'll be able to download that free at horseplayernow.com. Click on our AQHA links, and the latest later this week should be available on Thursday or Friday for the Saturday event. So be sure to download the AQHA Bank of America Racing Challenge Championships wagering guide. Free picks and analysis on all 5 of those major races coming up this Saturday at Los Alamitos. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics tonight. We've already given you our retrospect of the Breeders' Cup and what that meant to us. One of the things we want to talk about next is racing cliches. We hear this in sports a lot. We hear things in horse racing. If it's repeated enough, and if we're just through a political season, if you didn't vote last week and didn't get a robocall or didn't get something in your mailbox or your email or your text messages then you're a rarity here. But cliches are the kind of things that if they're spoken enough, people just start to believe them. And one of my favorites in sports is coming up a lot right now as we get towards championship runs in college football and the NFL season hits the second half of the years. The old defense wins championships. And if you hear that over and over enough, you start to think, well, you have to have a great defense to win a championship. But it's just not the case. I mean, the college football playoff, the average score in the title game since they've had a title game, 37-31. 31 points got you a loss on average. The winners averaged 37. In the Super Bowl last year, they hit the over on the first drive of the second half. I know that for a reason, wink, wink. But they score in the NFL, too. I mean, every Super Bowl champ since 1975 except one has scored at least 21 points. So the thought that they tell you defense wins championships over and over and over again isn't necessarily the truth. And in horse racing, you hear a lot of stuff bounced around. And we'll start here with Neumeier because I know this topic you find amusing and enlightening at the same time. I mean, what are some of the things you hear bounced around the racetrack, Neumeier, that you just don't necessarily agree with, but you hear over and over?
Yeah, you do. You hear them a lot, and typically they're uninformed people. Cliches by nature are truisms, but in racing, maybe not. One of them is, well, time only counts when you're in jail. Really? Time doesn't count? Well, ask Andy Beyer or guys that do the sheets or guys that do Jerry Brown's work with his figures, etc., or Brisnet or whatever. And speed figures are the foundation of the game, whether you like them or not, whether you use them or not. And they're based on, guess what, folks? Time, all right? So if I run a 100-yard, 100-meter dash, I'm going to be timed in, 22 seconds. If Usain Bolt runs a 120-meter dash, or 100-yard meter dash, he's going to be timed in 9.7 seconds. So, yes, time is very, very important, okay? Because that's what speed figures are all about. Now, not raw times, but average times and times, hard times and all that stuff, I think they're all very, very important. So that's one cliche. I think you can throw it out the window. The time only counts when you're in jail. BS.
And Neumeier, I don't know what kind of figure that'd be for you in the 100 meters. I don't know. Briss will give you a raw time, not adjusted. Maybe Beyer would adjust for one of your par figures or something. But it's a low number, I'm sure, for you in the 100 meters.
Well, Usain Bolt's going to get about a 130, so that helps Neumeier's chances right there. You got to be in, the 50s or 60s, and,
Yeah, I might be able to beat Roseanne Barr straight up, or John Goodman, or something like that. But that's about it. So it is all relative. Hey, another beauty to me is don't bet a horse that's never done anything before. Really? I've made more scores. In fact, I lived for first-time grass horses. Mm-hmm. So that's something they've never done before. Run on the turf. And yet this is where the money is made, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And if you do the background, and, you're going to be right sometimes, you're going to be wrong sometimes. But to me, I mean, a lot of horses that you see, particularly nowadays, with 2-year-old maidens, which I love, or early 3-year-olds on the grass, which I love, and using the pedigree and other angles, I think it's extremely lucrative. And first-time turf, I mean, if I had looked at a racing form and I saw a maiden, for example, at, 60-1 as a first-time run the turf, okay. He then comes back and runs second. He then comes back and is 9-5. He was 60-1 as a first-timer. He was 9-5 as a second-timer. So, I mean,
right.
Price is everything, and it goes to show how absurd it all is to me.
Yeah, and I think Caton uses that statement with the caveat, never bet a favorite to do something they've never done before. And for that,
never bet a favorite, period.
Yeah,
or a short price period. That would be a good one, I think. Yeah, that's reasonable, I guess. But, you never take a short price, you're saying, with something that's never been done before. But this happens all the time. I mean, 6 furlongs to 7 to a mile and a 16th. Mile and a 16th to a mile and a quarter. I mean, eventually they're going to break through, and they got to start somewhere. So, I mean, you got to take your chances where you take your chances.
What about you, Spence? What are some of the things you hear repeatedly but don't necessarily subscribe to?
Well, one of the things, and I might be trying to get a little too cute by half here, but, a thing that I've said for a long time, and a lot of people say, is the idea of pace makes the race. Now, I'm not saying I don't believe that anymore. I mean, you could look at episodes from earlier this year, and I've said I believe that. But, even before we were talking today, we were all kind of joking around about how you never have any real idea what these riders are going to do with, you've got a lone speed horse who's going to get choked back to fourth. You've got a horse who's never sniffed the front, getting hustled up to the, engine to hassle the other pace horses. So on one hand, in the running of a race, yes, pace makes the race. A slow pace is always going to benefit the horse up near the top. But as time is going on, the idea of pace makes the race beforehand in my handicapping is becoming a lot more difficult for me to kind of abide by, in the sense that you almost never know what you're going to get these days unless you have very specific riders. So that's one that, at least in practice on the track, in the middle of a race, very much true. But as far as handicapping goes, I think I can't explain the shift, but for me it is becoming slightly less true kind of every time I handicap as time goes on.
I hear that refrain often. We do a lot of live chat and interactive things throughout the course of, the last decade with Horse Player Now, with the night school program. I hear a lot of people say it is more difficult now, and you see it on Twitter, obviously, with people's, knee-jerk reactions. It's more difficult to figure out what the jockeys are going to do in terms of pace. I'm just going to assume that we all agree with that premise, because I kind of think we do from the conversations we've had with each other over the last several months and years together. But is there any place where any of us, and any of you guys can jump in on this, is there any place where you feel like you still have a good grasp of what the pace is going to be? Like, is there a situation where it's easier to predict the pace than others? Distance, kinds of horses, main track turf. Where do you feel comfortable still trying to project the pace? Jerry, what about you?
Well, I'll tell you, I won't go as far as to say time only counts in jail, but as far as looking at the pace and what the times that horses have run up to a certain point, I find that it's really difficult to predict absolutely how a race is going to set up, because sometimes a horse will be out front in 23 and 3 and doing okay out there, and you'll look at the next time the horse is out, you'll see in the form where he was in front 23 and 3, and maybe others in that race were 22 and change. What it doesn't tell you is that the horse was absolutely strangled in 23 and 3. So you got to jockey activity aboard the horse, I think is a real important factor, of course, during the pace. Also, when you're watching a race and you see a horse is out front and he's going 49 and change, and everyone's getting excited because he's gone so slow, and he's going to have just so much left for the drive, and more times than not, that horse gets beat because the horses that are normally 15, 20 lengths behind are like 2 lengths behind. Mm-hmm. So maybe those horses behind him, they don't have the big dramatic punch, but if they're just a couple lengths back, the chances are they have a good chance to outfinish him regardless of what the pace is. So it's different if they're 10 or 15 lengths out of it behind a slow pace. Then the horse definitely has a chance to go gate to wire. But it's just really kind of difficult to picture in your mind exactly what's going to happen in a pace setup.
Neumeier, do you find any situations easier or harder?
I think you have to identify what's important in your world of horse racing, and to me, not necessarily in this order. In terms of night school, people that want to learn about the game need to be educated about takeout, for example, which is extremely important and varies via bet and via track, whatever, because that's the tax that you have to pay So that's very important. Number two, in terms of what Brian was talking about, projecting pace, he's right about that. But I feel that it is more productive if you analyze a race after the fact and understand what happens sometimes during a race shape. And what do I mean by that? I mean fast, early, slow, late. Yes, that to me accentuates a horse that's on the lead. Slow, early, fast, late is really important on the turf. And I really look for horses that close links in a really slow pace. So both of these are after the fact observations that I might make. So rather than, I think he's right. I think Brian's right. I mean, projecting a pace going in is important, and pace does make the race, but it's extremely difficult to figure out because jockeys and trainers will fool you 80% of the time. So I would rather go back and look at it after the fact and try to identify horses who have a favorable race shape towards the next event.
I think, Jeremy, I would jump in there too. I would to answer that question of whether there are, since I kind of brought this up, but whether there are certain race types that are easier than others, or at least where I feel like I have a better handle on it. And for me, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but for me, it's really one-turn races. I have a much easier time getting a handle on the pace, at least on paper. And maybe part of that is just that you're going 5 furlongs on the turf. You don't have as much time for, jockeys to kind of try to be too cute about things. If you've got speed, boom, you've got to use it right away. Whereas, going a mile and an eighth, a mile around 2 turns, you kind of get this, weird kind of like jockey game that goes on into the first turn and up the backstretch. And almost a lot of times you see these speed horses, they're getting way too cute with these pace horses. Just let them roll. Mm-hmm. And as Jerry was mentioning, don't let these horses who should be a dozen lengths off of it stay within 3.5 of you by trying to be cute about it.
I think if you get to know your riders at a particular circuit, you're going to find that some are just gunners. There's just some people that are going to be aggressive 90 out of 100 times. Some jocks are going to get into the wrestling match, 50% of the time or more. So maybe if you've got the right situation with the right rider, you might be a little more confident on where a horse may be placed. But then again, you don't know what the other riders in the race are going to wind up doing. So that's one of those axioms in racing that we try, and one of the cliches that pace makes the race. That sounds good in theory, but may not always play out that way. One other one I want to throw out is the old axiom and cliche that the horse needed the race. Which means they weren't ready to run today. Maybe next time they'll do better. That was true when I began handicapping, but I'm 47 now. I've been doing this at least 35 to 40 years, back to my young youth. That is not the case in the last 5 years. There is no such thing as needed the race anymore. Whether it's out of competition, medications and training methods that they're giving these horses, or it's the fact that they just get them cranked up for one shot because the money's better than it used to be. Whatever the case is, whatever your conspiracy theory is, it's just as important to have time off between starts as it is to run back quickly like we used to. It's not the standardbred game where the same horses run every 7 to 10 days. In thoroughbred racing, it is not that way anymore. There are no horses who needed the race, and anyone who says my horse needed the race had better be about 70 years old as the trainer, if you're going to believe it. If it's Shug McGahee and he still believes in his training methods from 25 years ago, maybe one of Shug's horses needed the race. Maybe Rusty Arnold. But I'm talking about guys who have been around. The hard boots have been around forever. Everybody else in this game, there are no giveaways anymore, and there are no horses who needed the race. If they came back and ran a poor race first time, you'd better have a better reason for them improving in the second start than the fact that they just needed the race. I just don't see that relevant anymore.
Yeah, I think, Jeremy, what you're talking about a lot of times is trainer speak. And, they speak with forked tongue 80% of the time anyway because they have to politically. I get that. But the cliche that, other than, of course, needing the race, that I get a kick out of is, well, he's bound to move forward.
Right. Yeah. The twin brother of needed the race.
I study these sheets. I've looked at literally thousands of them over the years. And you take, let's say a horse has had one effort. And now he's coming up to his second effort. Okay, so let's say he runs, for the sake of argument, a 20 in his first race. Well, the second race, he may run a 15, moving forward, or he may run a 25 moving backwards. So in looking at these things, I've come to the conclusion that it's about a 50-50 split.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, how many people say he's bound to move forward? He is? Really? All the time? It doesn't work that way. Sorry.
We are going to move forward with more Night School. I think we're 50-50 to return after this break, according to Neumeier.
And we'll be right back with more Night School.
Hey, what's going on? Mikey here, and I'm going to tell you about an offer from my good friends at ExpressBet. Let's be honest, we know you love playing the races, but you can't always make it to the track. Sometimes life just gets in the way of a good bet. Well, what if I told you about a place where you never miss a bet and you start with house money? You'd say I'm crazy, right? Well, not at ExpressBet. Your first $100 are on them. That's right. Sign up with expressbet.com using promo code XBRadio, bet $100, and they'll deposit $100 back into your account the very next day. Hey, plus you could get an extra $25 if you use Express Fund Direct Deposit. You see what I mean? House money for betting the races. It's that easy. Check it out at expressbet.com to learn more. And don't forget to sign up with promo code XBRadio. You're gonna love it. And that's a Mikey guarantee. Must be 18 years or older and 21 years old in certain states to open an account with ExpressBet and reside in a state where such activity is legal. Void where prohibited. National Gambling Support Line 800-522-4700.
Some folks like to bet on the horses. Some like to bet on the games. Some folks like to bet on their phone. And some like to bet from their suite. So what's your best bet? All of the above. No matter how you like to bet, Remington Park is your best bet yet. With world-class horse racing, OKC's newest casino, and online suite booking now available. Remington Park, it's your best bet yet.
Pick, bet, and cheer on live racing from Woodbine and Mohawk Park. Thoroughbred and harness action. The wagers are just the beginning. Watch award-winning broadcasts covering both breeds, incredible battles contested over the most unique grass course in North America. Experience the full fields with over 130 thoroughbred and 160 live harness days. Get access to free handicapping material and join the ranks of Woodbine and Mohawk Park players from all over the globe. For more information, visit woodbine.com.
Welcome back to our Knights at the Round Table.
Welcome back to the November 2018 edition of Night School, the National Online Fan Education and Player Development Program from Horse Player Now. We are in Season 8 of Night School, episode number 259. Welcome in as our panel reconvenes, the Knights at the Round Table tonight. We're going to talk about some of your suggested topics now, and multiple people have chimed in over the course of the last several days and weeks wanting to know more about ticket structure. We talk about picking winners and the handicapping process a lot, but how do we structure our tickets and how do we maximize our bang for our buck? It's an important process, and I think that's one that horse players ought to really get a listen to, folks who play the game consistently, who may play in a similar style to you. I'm more of a weekend, couple times a week player than an everyday player. Neumeier likes to get after it a little more frequently than I do. So our structures and our styles might be a little bit different. One may suit you, and another may suit another listener. So certainly listen for things that might work for your playing style over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. I also want to give a shout out to Jason Beam, who does a good podcast, The Barn, for Bet America. He had a pro player on who goes by the pseudonym Inside the Pylons for a two-part special last week. It was about 3 hours in length, and a lot of their talk was ticket structure and strategies. Very little handicapping talk, a lot of gambling talk and how to structure tickets. For the most part, I would say we were in agreement, my personal style, and with this handicapper, probably on 90% of the topics. So if you want some more depth, you can go back in the Night School archives. Also, go check out that Barn podcast. You can find that online with the search, and on Twitter as well. Pretty good stuff there from Jason and company, so check that out. But guys, let's talk about ticket structure here. Starting intra-race. There's the win play show, and I don't know that there's any system built up in that you should bet this much here and this much in this pool. So let's just start with the exactas. Let's get to the exotics, I think, and the way that you approach the exactas. For me, an exacta is a situation a lot of times when I've got a horse that I like, but he's not offering a big enough price to win. I want to get at least 2-1, 3-1, something like that on a win bet in most cases, if not more. So if a horse I like, I think is going to win the race, I look to the exactas next. But I look to the exactas when there's a decent-sized field. If not, I may look for the daily doubles. For me, I get into ticket structure and exacta bets when there are more horses to play in the exacta than there are in a potential daily double. So if it's a 10-horse field, I know that there's 9 horses I can play in the exacta. I'll look at the size of the next race. What's the field size in the next race? If it's bigger than 9 horses, I feel like I could probably make more money in a daily double using the horse that I like versus playing an exacta intra-race. If it's less horses in the next race, then I've got a better shot at making more money, with my opinion, hitting the exacta in this current race than trying to stretch them out over 2. So for me, whether or not to make the choice to play an exacta has a lot to do with 1, opinion, and 2, field size. That's kind of where I start out my process. Brian, let's kick off with you in here. Do you have any kind of axioms or rules in building exacta tickets?
Well, I'll start with exactas, and then I'll kind of move on just a step further into, deeper exotics like a try and a superfecta. For me, so much of it, I very much agree in the sense that, I'm perfectly happy to just play a large win bet on a horse, but there are 2 reasons that I'll go digging into the exactas. 1, if the win price is not quite what I want, as you mentioned, and 2, just if it's one of my strongest opinions and I'm looking for other ways to try to, beef up a potential score if I've got what I consider to be a 5-star player or something along those lines. But looking into sort of deeper gimmicks, and Jeremy, I know this is a thing that you have kind of been the bearer for over the last decade or so, just always reminding people is that, deciding whether to play a trifecta or a superfecta, especially superfectas for me, the race itself has to determine that. And one of the big things in that sense is field size. A 7-horse race in a superfecta has 840 combinations. A 10-horse race has better than 5,000. So by adding 3 additional horses, you multiply the potential combinations by 6. I've got no real use in trying to fish for a trifecta or a superfecta, in a 6-7 horse race, looking for those big fields only. So, you've got this large wagering menu, and I think, I'm guilty of this too. I frequently say, I'm a multi-race player. I'm a pick 3, a pick 4, a pick 5 player. But in the end, especially, just calling back to last weekend, Breeders' Cup kind of weekend, you've got these big races with big fields, and you can make a lot of money. And I mean, a perfect example at Abel, she's 4-5, and the superfecta paid better than 4,100 to 1 for that. So when you get those big fields, I think that's kind of where you dig in, and you don't have to necessarily be against a favorite. But if you're going to key a favorite on top of one of those wagers, you better not be playing in a 5, 6, 7 horse field, because you're setting yourself up to lose money that way.
And Jerry, you've been around the game a long time. I'm not going to age you and Neumeier, but you are the deans of this foursome here. You were around back when there were win bets and $5 exactas, right? I mean, the initiation of the initiation of the exotic wager was the $5 exacta, I think, in a lot of places. For you as a exotics bettor, I mean, when are you looking to get into the exactas? Does your experience over the years tell you that you're better one way or another, or how do you look at building out these kind of tickets?
Well, the first thing I look for when I'm handicapping is to try to find a decent price for a win ticket, without being too greedy. But more times than not, you can't, and you're looking at exactas and the multi-race plays, and one thing I'll do when I'm playing exactas and tries and supers, I have to use prices and horses that you normally they don't jump off the page at you, but you're talking 30 or 40 to 1 shots that you're using in the second, third, and fourth spots, and that's the only way you're going to make any money at it, unless you're the kind of person that can play a $50 straight try, which that's not the league I'm in, actually. So looking at look for prices. Also, if you can't find a price and you have an overwhelming favorite, maybe a 3 to 5 shot, I approach a race when there's something like that, and there's a large field. A 3 to 5 shot, especially if it's a speed horse, it's kind of take the heart out of a lot of contenders. You take horses that you rank on paper that they can run, second, third, fourth, and fifth. A lot of times, if a horse is so much better than the others, especially other horses with speed, those horses will just back out of it, and you'll get some plotter coming from way, way back. So, that's basically what I look for. Just trying to piece together something that's worth my while, with longer prices, because you don't have to have a real good horse to run third or fourth in some of those races. You can have an overwhelming favorite, and then maybe a horse a couple lengths back. And how many times have you seen it when it's like 15 lengths back to the third horse? Mm-hmm. Well, any horse can run third there. So you're looking to fish out some prizes in the minor, particularly the minor places, to make it worth your while.
I like what you say there with, when you have an overwhelming favorite, it just seems a lot less likely to get the natural second choice, natural third choice to run right in behind him, because those are generally the more competitive horses that are in the mix, and then they get their heart ripped out, like you said, by an overwhelming favorite. So, structuring tickets in exactas, tries, supers, when you do have that big favorite is, get rid of the most logical horses in the next spot, and then see what you can do from prices, from that point forward. Neumeier, what about you? I mean, you were also in that just win, play, show era at one point in your life, and the exotics came along and probably made you a happier man.
Hey, don't forget, age is wisdom. Don't forget that.
Yes, very much.
The beauty of exacta wagering, to me, is that I'm a firm believer in return on investment. And what exactas can do, if you have a computer and you can use ExpressBet or TwinSpires or whoever you opt to choose from, you can tell by looking at the will pays what each 1-2 will pay, or 2-3, or 1-3. And when you start doing the math, one of the more popular exactas is a 3-horse box, which to me is kind of ridiculous when you look at it, because if you look at the will pays, and let's say you're going to box the 1-2-3, $12 and a $2 play. Here's the returns. Possibly returns. The 1-2 pays $15. The 1-3 pays $19. The 2-1 pays $8. The 3-1 pays $13. Well, when you add them all up and you go to the $12, well, that's an absurd bet, because the return is less than even money when you think about it. So the beauty of betting exactas to me is that we know going in, or we should know, if we do our homework, what they're going to pay, what the return is. You add up your, how much you're going to bet. You see what the possible return is. And if you are correct, you will be rewarded handsomely for it. So there's a key where using that will pay function on a computer is very, very important. Point 2. In betting exactas, for me, I understand that every once in a while, typically the favorites are going to be speed horses. And you're going to get a fair share of merry-go-round races where speeds run 1-2, but not often. Right. So I like to mix up the styles. Mm-hmm. I like to go with a front runner and a closer, 1-2 in either direction. So that's my world, and I really understand that. I can get beat by merry-go-round horses every once in a while, but I truly like to A, go by the will pays, and B, use horses with a variety of winning styles in an exact.
Good stuff there for sure. You know, one thing that I've kind of been in and out of over the years, and I'm leaning back towards being in vogue with, is taking that win place bet and just parking the place money in the exactas, back-wheeling a horse second instead of betting to place. You know, if you're going to bet 10 to win and 10 to place, I think now that you're better off putting the 10 to win and then playing $1 exacta all with your horse second. Unless the favorite is going to come rolling in, your chances of your exacta paying more than the $10 place bet, you can look like Neumeier said. The will pays are going to be up there, and there will be rare instances, you know, where you're going to look at it and say, wow, none of the exactas are really paying that much with this horse back-wheeled. Maybe you just keep the money in the place pool, or maybe you just say, I'm not even going to play to place and put more on the win end. But I've been a big win place better in recent years. When I was younger, I really dove at that, you know, 3 horse to win, all 3 exacta. And I don't know why. I don't really understand the evolution of it. Maybe it is just habit. Maybe it's just easier to bark it out, to go and 10 to win in place on the 3 instead. But the more I watch and the more I see the results and the more you follow and look at things, I'm not so sure that you're not better off rolling the dice at that point mathematically. Yes, you will get a couple rare instances where your $1 exacta pays less than the $10 to place would, but then the time zone it pays much more. You know, you end up walking into a $240 exacta because some scrub won the race, you know, at 30 to 1. Your horse runs second, and instead of taking a $10 place that's paying, you know, $6 to place, and you got it 5 times for $30, all of a sudden your $1 exacta is coming back $240. That makes up for a lot of those times where it didn't quite pay quite as much. So I think from an exacta standpoint, I think the exacta back wheel can be a good replacement for betting win in place. Now, in order to utilize that, you figure you've got to be spending, you know, in an 8-horse field, you're going to have at least 7 horses that can win the race. So you have to be looking at somebody who's going to bet at least 7 to win and 7 to place in order to kind of put that into motion. If you're betting 2 to win in place, you're not going to get into the ball game of taking 2 of the horses in a back wheel. I'm talking about back wheeling the entire field with your horse if you're going to play in that style. But that's one of the things I've looked at in the exactas in recent years. The tries and the supers, as we kind of pivot a little bit here and talk about the deeper intra-race exotics, I have to tell you, you know, we talked about the cliches and how things have changed, and while I once didn't like layoff horses, now I accept the fact that they're just going to run well. The trifecta has been my bet of choice since the early 1980s, since the bet was created, since self-service machines were created, and I was a teenager who could figure out how to run the self-service machine when the old guys couldn't. I pride myself as a trifecta aficionado since the days they were first ever offered. The 50-cent combination has killed the trifecta. I just cannot find myself getting the kind of returns on the trifecta now that we once did in a dollar era. They were always dollar for boxes. I don't ever remember an era with a $2 minimum trifecta, but the difference between a dollar combination and a 50-cent payoff, they are just driving the prices down. Everybody can cover the combinations that need to be. The only time I see in the trifectas, guys, nowadays is when you beat a favorite and the second horse is also the price. You know, if you like a 3-4 to 1 shot that's not the favorite and want a key on top, you have got to put that all or spread leg in the middle. It can't be third. The 50-cent combination with a favorite winning, it doesn't matter who runs third. I mean, everybody's got those covered. You never get much back. It used to be you could spend, for me, a $20 ticket, 1 over 5 horses, on a $20 ticket, and my expected return on the kind of plays I would make would be $500. I was trying to turn 20 into 500, 25 to 1 on my return. You just can't do that in the 50-cent era. The tries that come back that pay $500 now are just the ones that are just so ghastly impossible to hit. You can't do it with logical horses anymore. So it's really changed the way I attack the trifectas. You've got to get a non-favorite in the top spot, spread in the second spot, and then use your logical horses third. It's kind of counterproductive to common sense because you want to put your better horses towards the front of the finish. But in terms of the return, if you get 2 horses in the first 2 slots, they're anywhere in the top 3 or 4 wagering choices. It really doesn't matter what runs third. They're covered anymore, and you're not getting that big return. You still have to see 25-1 on your return on investment in a trifecta because they're still hard to hit. But when you do hit them, you just don't get that 25-1 anymore with the 50-cent combinations. So I'm open to anything you guys may have to say in the trifecta after kind of my mea culpa. I kind of have divorced my favorite lady in racing for the last 30 years. In the last year or two, it's just come to that for me. Love to hear what you guys have to say. Maybe start with you, Jerry. Any advice on the tries or supers and strategies?
Well, I've the supers haven't really been around that long, and it took me a while to get used to them. But today, if I'm playing those kind of gimmicks, I just bypass the trifecta and I do the supers, and I don't spend a whole lot of money when I'm doing it. Most places it's a dime super, and you can have all kinds of different things working, and generally that's the direction I go. I'm like you. The 50-cent try kind of, you can see it when you look at any results at any tracks. Those trifectas almost never pay what they should. Yeah. But a lot of times the supers, even though it's just a dime play, they'll pay a ton. Mm-hmm. And, just even for a dime. So that's generally the way I go. I'm kind of past this trifecta phase.
What about you, Brian?
Well, for me, one of the things when you were talking about kind of getting turned off from playing the trifecta, it's not necessarily in this same conversation, but the last 18 months, that's exactly how I've started to feel about the pick fours, which used to be my go-to wager. My biggest lifetime scores all came on dollar pick fours, and you're getting that kind of coverage. I've been kind of turned off because you get some prices and everybody's got them covered because the tickets are cheaper to put together, and just the payoffs I think are a little bit shorter. I'd rather have that risk-reward bar be set a lot higher with a dollar minimum and lose more frequently but get paid when I am right that way. But as far as the tries and supers, a lot of the ways that I find that very appealing is when I have a specific key horse that I want to put on top, and I think it's a big field with a lot of horses in that mid-range kind of price area, your 15 to 30 range, who I really think can run third or fourth. Nothing better than having a key horse on top and being able to sprinkle an all or two in that 10-cent superfecta, and you try to, really key those wagers around 1 or 2 horses and hope for a little bit of chaos in the other spots. I think especially in big field races like we see in the Breeders' Cup, some big turf maiden kind of races, that's the way that it works best for me, is to have 1 or 2 strong opinions and then try to get some of those sort of mystery horses to round out the wagers at big prices in the other spots.
I've heard some whales talk in recent interviews, and people I know and people I respect in the game. That super play is especially like when it's on the Derby and it's $1 and things. That's kind of become a holy grail chaser. Where you box a lot of horses and take a shot at taking down a big chunk and a big pool. But on an everyday basis, not as easy to do on the swing, and the folks who are boxing multiple horses in superfectas are really racking up the combinations. It doesn't take long to add up. It still seems to me that for the vast majority of players playing on any sort of bankroll consideration, that you got to have a key horse in there somewhere to play the superfectas. Most logically, you're keying a horse on top. Maybe you have an opinion on a clunk along horse, like we talk about. Anybody can run third and fourth. Maybe you've got a couple of those on the bottom of your ticket, and you're actually keying 30-1 type horses to run third or fourth, or horses who always find a way to get beat, the hangers. You key that horse second or third maybe in your ticket. But Neumeier, try supers. Do you dabble, and how do you do?
No, I think you're right, Jeremy, and I know a lot of I don't use it myself because I don't know what, going in, what tries are going to pay or what supers are going to pay, so I avoid it. I like to know going in exactly what I'm going to get back, how much I'm going to bet, how much I'm going to get back. I've made this point a number of times on this particular show, and that is about, when we talk about structuring tickets, a lot of times we talk about this obsession, and I call it an obsession, with horizontal wagers. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about a guy I know who puts out a sheet every day, who knows what he's doing. He's extremely good at handicapping California and New York, and he has a lot of members that follow his stuff. A few months ago, he introduced a nuance called horizontal wagers. And I had a conversation with him, and I said, I think you're pretty good at what you do, but I'm going to guarantee you that this is a trip to the poorhouse for you. And it's funny that he's very judicious. He doesn't play it every day, but when he has something, pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, he'll put it in his report. Well, so far he's had a 0 return on his investment with the horizontal wagers. So I kind of laugh when I see this, because this is, to me, what people are into these days. Right. And I know that racetracks love to promote it. I know that media types like to promote it as well, because let's face it, it's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. People want to, people's eyes get buggy when they see, there's a $200,000 rainbow, pick 6 at your control today. And if you bet it with a 20-cent increment, you can double your parlay. Well, have you checked out the take on some of that stuff? Well, you might. Yeah. So, I just think that generally speaking, and this is just my thing, and everybody can do what they want, everybody can have fun, and that's great. But I want to know going in, Jeremy, what I'm going to get back for what I bet, because that to me is a return on investment. Mm-hmm. And while I'm a hypocrite sometimes, and then I'll bet a 3-day pick 6 carryover, or I'll bet a rainbow 6 if it's a mandatory giveaway. No other day, just a mandatory giveaway. I'm in on that as well. But I just think generally that we've got to stop with this obsession about horizontal wagers. It's really causing people to go to the poorhouse. It really is.
Well, yeah, and the other word is multi-race wager with horizontal wager. If somebody is listening and is more familiar with that terminology, the pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s, pick 6s, jackpot 5s, jackpot 6s, all the different ways they can do it. Now, it's funny because we put out a handicapping report, the Buzz Report. You guys all take part in it, and we've put it out for 9 years now. And the one thing we always got from customer feedback when we didn't do it was, we want suggested wagers for pick 4s and pick 5s. So we put it in it because that's what the public wants. But like you're talking about, a trusted handicapper who does his due diligence and does hard work hasn't hit one at the meet that he's publishing information for. And we did the same thing with the Buzz Report. I like to be as honest with people as possible. We don't hit a lot of those pick 4s and pick 5s that we're doing 2 days ahead of time for a product. They're hard to hit, and I'm not blaming the fact that we have to advance handicap. It is hard as hell to string together 4 or 5 winners in a row. I don't care if you use an ABCD system of ticket maker, or if you're doing a caveman and somebody wants to tell you it's because you're setting them up wrong. The thing that's difficult is picking the 5 in a row. It doesn't take much to bust you. Look at Breeders' Cup Friday, for instance. Like the first 2 winners, like the last 2 winners. Didn't like the horse in the middle at all. I didn't like Jaywalk at all, who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. She was the snake eye in the middle of the die. It was 2-1-2 if you want to look at the races like that. And unless you had Jaywalk, you weren't hitting nothing, pal. Jaywalk knocked you out of the first pick 3, the second pick 3, and the last pick 3. Jaywalk knocked you out of the pick 4, and she knocked you out of the pick 5. One horse. You could have a great opinion on everything, and if you did not like Jaywalk on Friday, you got zip when it came to the multi-race wagers. And that was a case with us in the Buzz Report. It was a case with me personally. If I was playing the pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s that day, I would have been totally knocked out by having one opinion that wasn't correct. That's what makes those wagers so damn difficult, and it's a tough game that we start with. But like Neumeier said, they can be a fast track to the poorhouse. And when you hit them, you need to get paid. So like Spence's point, where the dollar pick 4s used to set him up for half the meet, you hit a nice one, you hit for a couple grand. The 50-cent pick 4s are now coming back at $425, and well, that's a nice day at the races. That's not going to set you up for even the week in your wagering, much less half the meet. So you can't get the scores you once did in those. So when you're ticket structuring and you're putting these tickets together, which brings us back to the original question of how you want to structure these tickets, you want to limit these casting wide nets, 7x7 by 5x5 stuff. It's just not the way to go, especially if you're playing on any sort of limited bankroll. A lot of the guys you hear that are quote-unquote professional horse players and people who do this for a living, keep this in mind, folks. And everyone we've ever had in night school, from Duke Matisse down, told you they can't win without the rebates. They need the rebates to be successful horse players. Rebates are, they bet a lot of volume so they get money back. So if they can be within 5 or 10% of even for the year and get a big rebate back on betting several $1 million, now you made enough in rebates that you can say, hey, I've got a $100,000 a year job, $200,000 a year job betting the horses. But without the rebates, they cannot do it. And to a person, they tell you that. The professional horse player from Las Vegas, that Inside the Pylons, that I referenced on Jason Beam's podcast with the Barn last week, said the exact same thing in his interview. Without the rebates, they can't do it. And rebates are given for different amounts based on what company you're with, what wager types you make. Sometimes these professional players are playing particular wagers because those are the ones they get the biggest rebate back on. So when you take in the takeout into effect, how much they get on the rebate, it becomes math to them, and it's a number. I can make this bet and make 3 cents off of it if I just run it out over the course of the entire year. Those are the kind of thought process that are going into it that the guys on this podcast aren't playing at the volume, the frequency, and in a rebates kind of program that's going to benefit them to that kind of degree. So you have to look at things differently if you're listening to this podcast and you're playing once a week, twice a week. You go to the track, you take your $200-300 a week you may have in fun money, and you want to go out and have a good time. Maybe it's $50, maybe it's $100. But you're looking at things a little bit differently, a bit differently, in how you want to structure tickets and want to play them. And I think a common theme for all of us is it's harder to hit a good score than it used to be. We have made this game with the takeout. Neumeier talks about the impact of takeout, which is big. There's a bigger percentage of bets being taken out than was in yesteryear. That's a big part of it, so there's less in returns. The 50 cent, the 10 cent, the 20 cent minimums, the dollars versus twos. We talked about an exacta. When exacta started in the 1970s and early 80s, it was $5 to play an exacta. There was a reason for that. That was the jackpot, and they didn't want a lot of people hitting them. Now everything is smaller increments, and that puts a lot more people in play, guys, but it puts them in play for a smaller amount, and everybody's kind of passing chips around the table, I think, Neumeier, in this day and age. I think there are less people getting a good score today than ever before, and more people just kind of pushing chips around. Would you agree with that?
Well, again, it's kind of human nature. People want to, lose 20 pounds in a week. People want to stop at McDonald's drive-thru and wolf down their hamburger in 15 seconds. People want to make $10,000 in a pick three. That's just the human nature goes that way. And I think that if you want to be real about this, that if you can play and hold your head, somewhat above water, rebates help. There's no doubt about that. I'm in that world as well. Mm-hmm. But what do rebates do? Well, if you lose, $7,500 a year, with the rebates, maybe you'll only lose $5,000 a year. Well, that's okay. I've had fun. The intent was there. I worked hard, but I think we need to keep our heads above water with this game. And it's very easy to get frustrated because a lot of stuff happens in this game. It's a lot easier to get emotional about it and throw your pen down when you get taken down because of an inquiry or a bad ride or a horse that didn't break. So many things can happen in this game. We love it. We are into it. And I think that, I've been pretty lucky in my days that I've been able to cash enough to keep my head above water. But I can't say that, that I'm going to make a living doing it. I can't. And I would tip my cap to anybody in the contiguous United States that could tell me they make a good living betting horses and horses only. I want to meet that person.
Maybe one day they'll come out. When I was the editor of Horse Player Magazine, I put out the APB for those kind of people to come discuss the fact. But every time we ran into somebody, they had a wife who was well-to-do, they had a big fund that they sold out that they're playing off of, or or they subsidize it with other things, real estate, etc., etc. Like you say, it is very difficult to find the person that is 100% only playing horse racing and doing it at enough level to make a good living at it. It's a difficult pursuit, but boy, do we love it, and that's why we're here on Night School, and we gather each month to talk about the game and see how we can inch ourselves forward, hit a nice winner, enjoy the fruits of our labor, and move on to the next race on the program. When we come back in Night School, more on this November edition. Stay with us.
We'll be right back with more Night School.
I've never experienced anything like it. I thought to myself, this could be today. Why not today? And it was. The horse went from last to first and won by a nose. Winning the NAC changed my life. It never would have happened without TwinSpires.com. I won a TwinSpires qualifying tournament and went on to take the $1 million prize. Play at TwinSpires.com and you could be the next one to hit it big.
Do you want unlimited access to handicapping without exorbitant prices? Then Brisnet.com has you covered with a variety of plans for past performances, pedigree, and raw data. The Brisnet.com Performance Plan offers unlimited PDF past performances for just $75 per month and is available at Brisnet.com/PP. American Produce Records Online puts the pedigrees of nearly 1 million dams and more than 2 million foals at your fingertips, plus sire stats for only $275 per year, and is available at Brisnet.com/APR. The Brisnet.com data plan offers unlimited access to race day data files, perfect for handicappers with their own database or to plug into other people's programs. The data plan is just $125 per month. Visit Brisnet.com for all this information and more, and discover why Brisnet.com is the handicapper's edge.
Strategize, analyze, select. Join Keeneland Select to bet on racing from around the world on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, anytime, anywhere. Featuring the best rewards in racing, free pass performances, live video, race replays, and more. Plus, Keeneland Select invests a portion of its profits back into the sport. Join Keeneland Select today and earn a $150 sign-up bonus at KeenelandSelect.com. Dedicated to the sport and dedicated to the players.
Welcome back to our Knights at the Round Table.
Welcome back to Night School. Jeremy Plonk with you, and joined on this Bank of America Racing Challenge Championships week by AQHA handicapper and social media coordinator Denis Blake. Denis, part of our wagering guide coming up this week, and he knows all things quarter horse, so he's the right guy to come to here on Challenge Week. Denis, first, welcome to Night School and back to the program. You've been on with us before, but tell us what the Challenge Championships means big picture to the quarter horse industry.
Well, I mean, it's really a big night to kind of bring the whole industry together. We've got horses coming from all over North America, and even one coming in from Brazil, I believe, is going to make the big race. And it's, it really highlights all aspects of quarter horse racing. You've got a 2-year-old race, a 3-year-old race, older horses going 440 yards. There's a race for fillies and mares, and then there's a distance race going 870 yards. So there's really something for every kind of horseman and every kind of handicapper, and that's kind of why I love it, because you get a little bit of everything. So no matter what kind of race you like, you're going to see it on Challenge Night, and it's at Los Alamitos, which has hosted it so many times in the past and always does a great job. So I'm looking forward to it.
quarter of a century of challenge championships, an event that just keeps growing and growing, and Los Alamitos has been, the most common place where it comes back to, and probably the mecca of quarter horse racing this time of year at the end of the season. Still the champion of champions to come there, and so many other big races at the end of the season will determine world championships. The world championship and the discussion of top older male will certainly be part of the discussion as we get set for the main event on Challenge Championships night. Each division has its own name, but the main event is the Challenge Championship, and for $250,000, 440 yards, as you mentioned, the top older horses in that one. Tell us what we can expect. Entries come out on Wednesday, but who are the headliners?
Well, I think the two big-name horses in there are B.H. Lisa's Boy and Hold Air Hostage. B.H. Lisa's Boy has been, he's an 8-year-old. He's been one of the top older horses forever. And Hold Air Hostage was a champion 3-year-old last year. They've run against each other a couple times at Los Al, and actually in the qualifying race, they finished practically in a dead heat. B.H. Lisa's Boy just nipped Hold Air Hostage at the wire. So those two are going to go back at it again, and whoever wins is going to go on to the Champion of Champions in December. So there's $250,000 on the line, and then there's that entry into the Champion of Champions. So it's a big race.
And for those not familiar with quarter horse handicapping, you can go to horseplayernow.com, and on our AQHA page, a lot of the FAQ 60 videos that kind of give you a 60-second rundown of different handicapping styles and techniques and strategies. Dennis, give us your version of the FAQ 60. Summarize some tips that people should look at here in about a minute or so when they handicap quarter horse racing.
Well, one thing I would look at, and this is different than thoroughbred racing, if you're playing a big stakes at, Keeneland, you're going to look for horses that have been on the major circuit, and you're probably going to throw out a horse coming in from, call it one of the lesser tracks. But that doesn't really apply in quarter horse racing, especially tonight where you've got, or not tonight, but Saturday night, when you've got the best horses from every region coming into race. And in quarter horse racing, it's not uncommon to see a horse coming from Idaho or Wyoming or Washington, somewhere that you might consider a lower circuit, and they can come in and they can win these big races at Los Al or Remington Park. You see it all the time. And B.H. Lisa's Boy, who we talked about, he actually started in Idaho. He raced in Washington. He raced in Colorado. And now he's, won multiple Grade 1 races. So take a good look and look at the speed indexes, look at the speed ratings, and don't necessarily just throw out a horse just because he ran at some of the smaller tracks, because they do jump up and win sometimes, even on Challenge Championship night.
We'll see who jumps up in the 5 Challenge Championship races this Saturday night at Los Alamitos. Check it out. Download our free wagering guide coming up later this week, available at horseplayernow.com, and check it on social media at horseplayernow. Dennis, thanks for your time. Let's send it now back to Brian Spencer.
Next on FAQ 60, favorites. We all have our favorites in life, and horse players are no different. But in racing terms, the favorite is the horse with the most money bet on it to win. So while a favorite has popularity, it often has a low payoff, most often in the $3 to $6 range for a $2 bet. The good news is that favorites win about 40% of the time in American quarter horse racing, a stronger percentage than thoroughbred racing, which has about 36% winning favorites overall. If you can't beat the favorites and don't want to accept a short win price, join them. That's why exotic wagers were created. Keying the favorite in bets like the exacta, trifecta, pick 3, or pick 4 can still lead to big returns. This FAQ 60 is brought to you by AQHA Racing and Horse Player Now. For more, go to AQHARacing.com.
Welcome back to our Knights at the Round Table.
Welcome back to Night School. Happy to be joined to close out the show by Steve Bick. And Steve, something that we talked about very briefly on tonight's show and kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it was the debate that we're already starting to have and going to continue to have for the next couple of months for Horse of the Year this year. You've got Justify, who obviously accomplished something that no horse has done before. Very remarkable 4 months worth of work for him. But the campaign doesn't quite stack up as well as far as the on-track performance to accelerate with his 5 5 Grade 1 wins. So going into this Horse of the Year vote for the Eclipse Awards voters, how do you kind of balance the history making that Justify did earlier this year versus the on-track campaign that Accelerate had that might be a little bit better?
It's a remarkable circumstance, and the aftermath, the couple of weeks that we've had to kick this around, I think in the initial moments after the Breeders' Cup Classic, the groundswell, the in-your-face answer was that Accelerate had probably done enough now to even be considered in the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my initial reaction to some degree. But upon closer examination, and with the benefit of another few days, and I think with the benefit of another 6 weeks to the end of the year for people to turn their ballots in, it justifies the Horse of the Year. And there's really should be less of an argument about this than there might turn out to be. And in reality, actually, the 5 Grade 1s of Accelerate, well, Justify won 4 Grade 1s.
Fair.
And if we're going to parse it down to those kinds of results, then I suppose it's a full-fledged debate. If we take what Justify accomplished in the pantheon of racing history, then there's no discussion, really. He did something so unique, and people are going to continue to argue for a while about the quality of the 3-year-olds. What does that mean? We debate the quality of the 3-year-olds that Omaha and Count Fleet ran against. It's preposterous. It doesn't mean anything. The gauntlet that he made it through is unheard of. And just because it was 6 months ago, 5 months ago, whatever, it shouldn't be dimmed by something, by the flashy object in the sky in the last 10 minutes. There is no Horse of the Year debate. It justifies the Horse of the Year. Accelerate had a really good campaign for an older horse. You want to start chopping up the fields that he faced?
Sure.
That's immaterial. I mean, you had a horse do something unheard of. There's been plenty of older horses like Accelerate that have gone through the year and gone 6 of 7 and won the Breeders' Cup Classic and have campaigns like that. Though there'll be plenty more like that. There may never be another campaign like Justified.
And I think one of the things that I kind of wanted to get a follow-up on, I think this is probably an easier question than I'm going to make it sound like it is, but are we even having this conversation if American Pharoah hadn't won the Triple Crown a couple years ago?
That's an interesting sidebar. If Justify had been the 12th horse to win the Triple Crown, you probably would. And I'll fold in, if you want to fold in, evidence, you want to enter that into evidence, I'll enter into evidence the anti-Baffert sentiment, the people who want to have this debate because they don't like Bob Baffert. And, to pull a convenient line, if you don't like Bob Baffert, you don't like ice cream. That's a very young line. That's one of the mitigating factors in all this, is that there's people out there that resent Bob Baffert's success.
And, well, yeah, I mean, I think that I've probably seen some of that, as you mentioned, kind of folded into some of these arguments already. So, according to Steve Bick, it is Justify. I do not have an Eclipse vote, but for me, just that, just what he was able to do in those slightly less than 4 calendar months, just incredible, something we may never see again. Justify probably gets the edge for me, but 2 very solid horses. Steve, appreciate your insight on what is something we've started talking about and something that I'm sure we're going to keep talking about for the next 2.5 months or so. So this is going to wrap it up for the November episode of Night School. From HorseplayerNow.com, Brian W. Spencer on behalf of Jeremy Plonk, Bob Neumeier, Jerry Shottenkirk, AQHA's Dennis Blake, and Steve Bick. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back to close out Season 8, the second Tuesday in December. Good night.